Hey, what's up? John Sonmez from simpleprogrammer.com. So I got a question from one of my favorite question askers, which is basically how many hours should salaried employees work? And I'll talk about this in terms of, we could talk about it in terms of software development field, but it doesn't really matter because I think that this really is just kind of a universal concept for those of you, even those of you that aren't software developers out there that are curious about this, and my opinion on it. So here's what, one of the things that I always talk about, in fact, I talked about this a lot where I got pissed off at Joel Spolsky. You can check out the video about him talking about basically you can't do anything in your free time because your employers will own your work and stuff like that. But one of the things I talk about a lot is this idea that you want to earn your freedom, right? And I think I did a video on what freedom is, or basically like how to unmortgage your life. I think that might have been what I called it. Anyway, what I believe is that in general, right, you can kind of view life as you sort of have this upkeep cost. If you've ever played like a resource management game, like if you've played Magic the Gathering, or if you've played World of Warcraft, or the Warcraft, not World of Warcraft, Warcraft or StarCraft, or one of those kind of resource management games, you have an upkeep cost. So every day when you wake up, like you have a cost. There's a cost for you to live. There's a cost for you to eat, right? There's a cost for you to stay warm, and it's a negative value. And so you're kind of born into slavery to some degree, right? Because you have to pay that upkeep cost. You didn't ask to have that upkeep cost, but in order to live here on this planet and to survive, you gotta get that. And the only way you're gonna get that is that you have to work for it, and typically you have to work for someone else. Someone else has to give you the money that you need to pay that upkeep cost. And so you're sort of born into life with a mortgage, right? And one of the biggest goals, I think, in life is becoming financially free, which is to pay off that mortgage, to get to the point where you have some amount of income that's passive that actually pays that mortgage. Because once you have that point in life, you're actually free. You can actually kind of do whatever you want. You can just live your life, and that doesn't mean that you don't work. It doesn't mean that you don't do anything productive. It just means that you get to make that choice because you no longer have to pay the debt of the day-to-day upkeep costs in your life. So why do I say that about this idea of how many hours should salaried employees work? Well, it's because this idea that I have, that I sort of try to tell people, is that you should work as few hours as possible for your employer, right? And give yourself as many hours as possible. Now, as an employer, I know that this seems kind of weird. Like, why would you say this, John? And would you want your employees to do this? Well, here's the thing. If I'm paying you an hourly rate, right, to do something, I want you to work whatever hours. I want you to bill me honestly for the hours that you worked. I don't want you to work more hours, or I don't want you to either work more hours and not bill me. That's not right? I mean, if you do that, I'm not going to complain, but I don't want you to work less hours and then bill me for more hours. That's ripping me off, right? So if we have that kind of arrangement, it's hour for hour. But even then, right, you should be taking whatever time that you have left, and maybe you work 40 hours and then you work 10 hours for yourself every week or something like that, and you build something on your own that's gonna benefit you to be able to, because the more time you spend working for someone else, the less time that you're gonna have to generate some kind of passive income for yourself. Now you might need the money, and that can help you to generate passive income, and you can use that to invest to generate passive income. I did that, so it's totally fine to work for someone else, but you just don't want to give over your entire life to that. And so that's where it comes down to. Now let's say that you're a salaried employee. So if you're a salaried employee, typically the way that it works, like the idea behind being a salaried employee, is that I'm going to pay you X amount of dollars, salary, maybe per month or per year, for you to work an expected X amount of hours, right? There has to be an agreement on what it is, right? Because otherwise it's a huge difference, right? Because if I tell you I'm going to give you a job that pays $60,000 a year, let's say $80,000 a year, okay? and you're kind of expected to work the regular 9 to 5, 40 hours a week, okay? There's a huge difference in how much money I'm paying you between that, and if I say I'm going to give you a job that makes $80,000, I'm going to pay $80,000 a year, and I'm expecting you to work 60-hour weeks, or worse yet, 80 hours a week. If I expect you to work 80 hours a week, it's like you're getting paid half as much. It's like you're really getting paid $40,000, like you have two $40,000 a year jobs, right? So you have to know what this is up front and what that expectation is. And, you know, in general, like when I would accept jobs, I would say that I am, you know, I've been talking about in the agreement, like a salaried job, what's my expected hours? And you can ask, like, what do you expect me to work? And you can negotiate that part, because that should be part of the deal up front. And you should try to get that in writing if you can, because most employers are going to say, well, standard working hours. You can, I mean, you can twist this around, right? This is what I would recommend, is that you're smart enough to not say, well, I'm only working 40 hours a week. Instead, to say, what are my expected working hours, right? So that you're kind of asking the question of what hours do you expect me to work, right? And then if they turn around and say, well, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, that's your working hours. Okay, now we've got a deal, because now we're making a contract and we're saying, okay, you're agreeing to pay me X amount of dollars per month or per year in order for me to work these specified hours. And it doesn't mean that you don't ever work overtime or work extra hours. You know, I've certainly put in time, but that's what the deal is. And if they say, no, here's the deal, is we expect you to work 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, and then also, you know, 4 to 8 hours every Saturday and Sunday, then you can negotiate that up front. You can either negotiate for more pay, or you can say, no, that's not for me. I'm working my 40 hours, right? And that's what I'm doing. So really, you know, how many hours should a salaried employee work? In my opinion, you should be trying, if you're a salaried employee, to work 40, right? You should be trying to get that agreement in place. Now, there are some exceptions. Like I said, once in a while, you know, releases coming out, like you got to be smart. Like you want to do what's best for the company. I always believe that's true as well. And maybe a startup would have a little bit of a different mentality. But in general, what's most advantageous to you as an employee is to try and enforce that. And I've been at workplaces where people have basically, you know, asked me to work more than 40 hours, and I've said no. I work 40 hours. This is what I do, is I work 40 hours a week, and, you know, I'm not going to come in and I'm not going to stay overtime. If something absolutely needs to get done and it's an exceptional circumstance, I will do that, but I get my work done. I do more work than most people do in the 60 hours that they stay here, and that's what I'm willing to do. And if I have to look for another job, I'm going to look for another job. But, you know, and my work has always spoken for itself, and I've never been fired for that. I've been at work environments where people are putting in ridiculous amounts of hours, and guess what? At the end of the day, I get paid the same, and I'm also not interested in climbing up the corporate ladder if it involves working 60, 70-hour weeks, because what is the point, right? Every hour that you work more as a salaried employee than what the minimum is, again, not you should do a good job when you're there, but every hour that you pay more, it reduces your overall compensation rate, the amount of money that you're making per hour, which doesn't make sense to me. And if you're going to do that for a long time in order to climb up there, it would be better to take all those extra hours. I mean, if you're thinking about between working 40 hours a week and 60 hours a week and kind of brown nosing your way to the top by working all these extra hours, why not work the 40 hours a week, not get the promotions, not, you know, climb up the quote corporate ladder, but instead take those 20 hours a week and build a side project, build something for yourself, right? Start building your own company or building passive income with that. There's multiple ways to do it. If you're interested, check out my playlist on real estate investment. And I have a course on real estate investment that you can look into. That's how I built up a huge amount, you know, $10,000 a month worth of passive income. You know, I'm not going to get into that now, but you should be using those hours as much as you can to benefit you. Again, being an employer myself, I'm not saying, you know, don't misunderstand me here. I'm not saying cheat your employers, okay? If you're working hourly, you bill for the hours that you work, and you give it your all during that time. The same thing if you're working as a salaried employee. If you're working as a salaried employee, if you're taking my advice and you're only going to be there 40 hours a week, work your damn hardest at 40 hours a week. Don't goof off. Don't be checking email and doing all kinds of other stuff during that time. Work that time and actually put in that effort and make it so that your 40 hours is better than most people's 60 or 70 hour weeks. If you do that, you're not going to draw bad attention to yourself. And then invest that time, right? I mean, I'm not just telling you this so that you can be lazy, right? You should be working 60 hours a week, but you should be taking the other 20 hours or maybe 50, whatever, depending on your goals in life. But you should be taking as much time as possible for yourself to be able to build your own freedom. Because once you get to that point where you're free, where you've paid off that mortgage that you owe on your life, then you have a lot more ability to do what you want in life, and you're no longer a slave. You're no longer owned by someone else, right? And that's key, and that can be done. It can be achieved if you want to achieve that goal. So one other piece that I'll tell you here is that you're going to have a lot more joy, I think, a lot more fulfillment in life. You're going to have a much more pleasant life, at least in my opinion, if you were making $40,000 a year out of passive income for yourself with no boss, right, as passively as possible, right, then you would making $200,000 a year working for someone else, working 60-hour weeks. I'd much rather be in that position. And, some of you are like, oh, I couldn't live off of $40,000 a year. Yeah, you could. You could. You might have to move, right? You might have to cut down on some things, but a lot of people make the mistake. I'll probably do a separate video on this of thinking that their passive income needs to replace their full-time income. It's not. The point when you're free is when your passive income is equal to your expenses, right? And so what you have to do is you have to lower your expenses as much as possible, and then that passive income will be able to compensate for that, and then you'll have your time back. And once you have your time back, you can invest that time and you can actually make a lot more money. So that's my thoughts on that. If you're a full-time employee, then you got to figure out how you can get down those hours as much as possible. Because what is the agreement? What have you agreed to actually work? Is it 40 hours? That's the standard. And just be smart about figuring out how to get that information, because you have to have it, right? There's no such thing as a contract that doesn't specify the terms of the contract. And so it can't be open-ended. A lot of employers think, oh, well, I just own this person. No, you don't own this person, right? And from an employer perspective, if you're going to hire someone as a salaried employee, you need to have an expectation of how many hours you expect them to work. And it probably should be about 40. It probably shouldn't be much more than that, because you're going to get diminishing returns past that. So make that clear up front. Make that clear of what the expectation is, because we should all be operating in agreement, right? When you have problems where there's miscommunication and you don't know what you're being paid for or why, and you don't know what you're paying for, then you have a big issue. That's my thoughts on that. If you like this video, go ahead and click that subscribe button below, and I do about 2 to 3 videos a day on all kinds of topics, from career advice to personal development and life advice. Click that big subscribe button to become part of the Simple Programmer community. I'll talk to you next time. Take care.